Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the World Wanderers podcast. We're super excited for today's episode of the show, but before we jump into that, a huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by you, the listeners of the show, who support us on Patreon. For those of you who don't know what Patreon is, it's a crowdfunding platform that allows you to support us with a little bit of money and in return get some really awesome bonuses for being a part of our elite community. So if you'd like to join that, you can join at patreon.com/theworldwanderers. Thanks so much for your support. On today's episode of the podcast, we're really excited to have guest Becky Gillespie, and Becky is from TokyoBecky.com. She's an American who's been living in Tokyo for over 10 years. So this is a part of our pre-Japan excitement and planning. Becky's here to talk about what life in Tokyo has been like over the last 10 years, what life in Japan is like, and what first-time visitors in Japan, like us, should do, should not do, should be prepared for, and lots more. So without further ado, here's Becky. We are joined today on the podcast by Becky, you're American originally, right?
I am. Yes, I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay, cool. And Becky is living in Tokyo right now and has been for 10 years. So,
that's right.
Amazing. Welcome to the show, Becky. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Ryan and Amanda. I'm really excited to talk with you guys.
Yeah, and this episode comes at such a perfect time for us because we're headed to Japan in a couple weeks. So we got connected and I was like, what better chance to talk to somebody who has been living in Tokyo for 10 years and can tell us all about life in Japan.
Yeah, there's so much to say.
So I think a good place to start is if we back up 10 years ago and kind of talk about what first caused you to leave the U.S.
So it was a couple of things, but a big trigger for me was that when I was 21, the summer before my final year of college, I went on a study abroad program for 2 months, and it was a really cool study abroad program because we did some of the coursework before the summer actually started, just some random evenings at college in the spring semester. And then when we got it was in Western Europe, this whole trip. When we got there, our classes took place in like the ballrooms of hotels. So we would only have class from like 8 a.m. to noon every day. In these different cities in Western Europe. And so like Monday to Wednesday, we'd have class. And then Wednesday at noon, we were free to do whatever we wanted throughout the whole continent until we had to go to the next city. And so for example, we started in London and then the next city was Brussels. And we had 4 days in between, and it really allowed me to learn how to be a solo traveler, really, or travel in small groups and learn how the whole thing went. And I'd never been to Europe before that program. So by the end of 2 months, we had been to 12 countries and only 5 of them with our class. Our class had like 120 people in it from America.
Wow.
But it changed my life for sure. And, but I came back to school. I had 1 more year and then I was at a career fair a couple of months before I was graduating. I was a finance major and also an English literature major. And so I clearly didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's a classic pairing.
So I actually started in finance and the third year was kind of getting sick of some of the people in my classes. Like they were really, I don't want to use the word douchebag, but some of the guys were really money-minded. Of course, I guess it makes sense. But I missed English. I loved English in high school, and I thought maybe I'll just major in that too and see where it takes me. So I was interviewing for finance jobs, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, and nothing was really coming through. And then I saw this ad at a career fair on my campus for this for teaching English in Japan for 1 year. And they said a year of adventure in Japan. And I thought, I can do a year. And actually, a year or two before that, I had seen Lost in Translation. Have you guys seen that?
No, but so the co-working space we're working at has a media server. with a whole bunch of movies, and I went on and took like everything Japan related off. So
it's on our list.
We've got Jiro Dreams of Sushi. We watched No Reservations last night. We've got Lost in Translation to watch very soon.
I think it's required watching before you come.
Okay.
I can say that as I watched before I moved here, but I always joke though that movie is kind of about aching loneliness, but you really love Tokyo, I think, or you're intrigued by Tokyo by the end of it. So that was me. That happened to me, and I thought, oh, okay, well, I'll try a year. And I went to an interview in Chicago, actually. My parents came with me. They drove me up to Chicago from Cincinnati for this teaching interview. And I got the job. They prepare your work visa while you're still in the U.S. And it's a 1-year visa. And so then I went and started teaching, and I met a group of people. A lot of people were coming in with the same company. We all landed in Tokyo together, and then we had someone meet us at the airport and take us to the right train, and then actually had a roommate in my future apartment that I was going to be living in there meet me at the train station and walk me up to our apartment. And she also worked for the same company. So it was really a well-guided process to get you started in a place where I knew no one, I'd never been before, and I was alone and didn't speak hardly any of the language.
Yeah, so what was going through your head those first few hours in Tokyo where you're kind of wondering what you'd gotten yourself into?
I was a bit, but especially you'll be going through Shinjuku. It's the largest train station in the world. It's the major drop-off point coming from the airport, especially Narita Airport, which is the bigger of the two airports, but also the one farther away. I was in Shinjuku Station and seeing so many people go past me. And I just thought, where am I and how am I going to find my apartment? And waited for this guy to finally come and touch me on the shoulder and say, we're going through these ticket gates. We're going to this train. It's 19 stops. And then you get off at the 19th stop. And I was like, 19? What? And, luckily I got off at the right place because he didn't go with me. He just said, get on the train. And, and I will say this is before smartphones were around, so I was really going to be doing it myself if there was a problem. So,
yeah. Wow, that's such a crazy experience to have had.
And so what was the adjustment period like to go from college in the States into teaching full time in Japan?
To be honest, I was really lucky because I clicked right away with my roommate. I had two roommates, one from Australia, one from Canada, both teaching for the same company. And the Australian girl was just really friendly. And I'd never met anyone from Australia either at that time. And she just really showed me around our little town where we were living, how to use the train, how to get on it, how to get the banking, how that was going to work. And 2 days after I arrived, I went to this big meeting of all the new teachers for that week, because they literally brought people in every week. This company, by the way, was called Nova, and it still exists, but it famously went bankrupt in 2007.
I've actually heard of that.
Yeah, there were 900 schools and it went bankrupt, and teachers were arriving after the bankruptcy to no apartment and no job, and they hadn't told anybody. It was pretty wild, but I got out 3 months before the bankruptcy. Thank goodness.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, at that time, a few years before this happened, it was very exciting because you were meeting people from all over the world that were coming to teach English in Japan. So I found it nice, almost like a year, being in college in a way, especially that first year.
I guess it'd be a good adjustment period coming out of college where you're used to being around young people constantly, and then moving kind of into this professional role where you're still surrounded by really cool people.
Yeah, we had about 3 days of training with one of the trainers at the school, and then we had to teach a group of up to 4 students at one time. They could be a wide range of students. It could be a high school girl, a businessman, a grandma, and a teenage boy, all together in the class. If they were the same level of ability, that was pretty interesting.
That is interesting. I guess I just imagined it being a room full of kids.
Nova got more into that the longer I was there, and there were groups of kids, but a lot of your day was teaching teenagers to adult aged people.
Okay.
So
that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And so what was like some of the stuff about living in Japan that surprised you the most?
One thing that surprised me, I had read, and one thing that made me go, I think, was I read it was very safe, especially for women, that it would be okay and you wouldn't have to be like watching your purse all the time. And I found that to be completely true. It's the safest country I've ever been to, and I've now been to 46 countries. So that's saying a lot. But I was at a festival one day, and I dropped cash on the ground, like about $10 worth of cash. And I realized I dropped it and walked back 10 minutes later, and the cash was still just sitting there on the ground, surrounded by people. And this happens a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very common, and you'll see this when you come. If you go to a Starbucks or you go to any cafe, it's normal for people to leave their purse on the chair and go to the bathroom, or they can leave their purse for an hour. No one's going to touch it. It's shocking.
Have you like fully adjusted to that? Like, is that something that you do now?
Yes, I do. But I luckily am still aware enough that I know not to do that the minute I leave the country.
Yeah.
I think people who live here do have that problem sometimes.
Yeah,
so.
you go to...
I mean, Bali is a great example of somewhere you don't want to do that.
Indonesia or like South America, they'll just gone in a second.
Yeah.
I might safely say that almost nowhere else can you or should you do that, it seems, but it's true. And I don't know, you can test it. Do like a $10 test or something. Do a video. I always wanted to do a video where I had the camera set up and saw how many people passed the $10. That could be fun.
Yeah, that would
like
actually
the
be
social
really interesting.
experiments.
Yeah.
YouTube game.
Yeah, I walked by like 5,000 rupiah the other day at a cafe in Indonesia, which is like 50 cents Canadian, so like 30 cents American. And I kind of had this moment where this would have been interesting on the camera where I like looked at it and I was like, 5,000 rupiah. Ooh, I should take that. And then I was like, wait a second, that's not mine. Of course I shouldn't take that. And then I just like kept walking. But this interesting like, oh, I see money. I should take it. It's not claimed. And then my like conscious being like, of course you shouldn't take that. That's not yours.
Okay. Full disclosure. One time, not far from my house, I found $100 on the ground in Japan, and I picked it up and I kept it because I thought, I don't know where this would have come from or if this person will ever find it. I don't know how long it had been there, but I was like, I'm going to pay it forward. And then I donated it to one of my friend's charity campaigns online, but I was like, I'm picking it up. Yeah. Oops.
I feel like that's fun.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So so you've been in Japan for 10 years now. Has it been the kind of thing where it's like during year one, you're like, oh, I'll stay another year. During year two, it's like, yeah, I'll stay 2 more years. Or was it just right away where you said, I'm just going to move here permanently?
Well, I've actually, interestingly enough, I don't know. I've had stints in Japan, but I never gave up my visa. So I was there for 2.5 years at first, and then Nova, I could feel something was going on with Nova. So I left and moved back to Cincinnati, actually not knowing if I would come back to Japan, but I held on to the visa anyway, because I thought, oh, well, at least I can just go back in with this visa in 6 months if I change my mind. And I kind of did that. I had a lot of culture shock when I went back to Cincinnati. So I basically just said I have to go back. And 10 months after returning to Cincinnati, I never got a full-time job because I thought I don't want to get sucked in. I don't know if I'm ready for this. And I moved back to Tokyo and actually became an accountant when I moved back.
Kind of like fulfilled the finance part of your career.
That's interesting.
Exactly. I knew someone who was working at PricewaterhouseCoopers, like PwC, this big 4 accounting firm. And I said, I have a better chance, I'm pretty sure, of getting a job by knowing him there in Tokyo than I would in the U.S. knowing nobody. And I think it worked I think that's how it worked, actually. He claims that I got it on my own merit, but I think it was because I knew him.
So I want to dig deeper into that transition, but I'm curious, what was behind the, I can't remember if you used the word culture shock, but when you were back in Cincinnati, just not really adjusting back to American life. What was going on there?
So there's negatives there are negatives to this as well, but Tokyo in particular in Japan is such an efficient place that you really get used to the efficiency. It's so clean. It's so It's easy to get you can be very productive if you know how to do it. That when you get back to a suburban place in the U.S., that you have to have a car. I mean, there's no public transit except for like okay buses in Cincinnati. That I was like, oh, I have to drive everywhere. I'm living in the suburbs with my parents. Everything seems far away. And there's also something that you feel when you walk around all the time, because I walk so much here, and it felt like the streets were so empty in Cincinnati, and I felt almost like an isolation. And I don't know, there's a community feeling, even if, in Japan they are notorious for kind of not showing their emotion on the street, and that's true. But even without the emotion being shown, I felt like, where are the people? I feel kind of alone here. And the food too. I really love the food in Japan, and I really missed it because we have a lot of fast food restaurants in Cincinnati.
Yeah, no, that's fair for sure. It's interesting to hear you say that going back to Cincinnati was like, you feel like space, like there's a lot of space. You feel kind of like alone and isolated. And I say that just because we were watching a video about like a train during rush hour in Tokyo, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many people.
Yeah, that's every morning for me. It's almost every morning these days. But I actually will wait a couple of trains so that I can get a seat on the train, and that's, a lot of people do that. They'll wait 5-10 more minutes or go early just to have it be bearable for that.
Right.
So,
and you found like you've like fully adjusted to how busy it is in Tokyo.
Yes. Yeah. The only issues I have are when I've been away for a little while and then I come back, and sometimes I want to be alone. Like I want a bathroom where no one is actually in there, but there's always one person at least like hanging around, or you're in an elevator and there's always someone who gets on, or there's moments when you want that total like public quiet for yourself. That's hard to find.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure, like biggest city in the world. That definitely makes sense.
Yeah. But no one touches you. There's a thing about, they don't touch or push or anything. So you can be in a very crowded train and you're not being touched by anyone. It's quite strange. They do respect your space. So
that's nice to know. We were in Bangkok not too long ago, and the trains in Bangkok aren't too bad outside of peak hours, but we had one where it was, just quite busy, and there's a guy just like, kind of like train equivalent of like grinding on me.
Well, this does happen. This does happen in Tokyo, but it tends not to happen to foreigners on the train because they're afraid of you. They think you're going to scream. But a lot of Japanese women will be targeted, and their there's cameras and things. And I've definitely seen the police on the train stations in what looked to be a discussion about that. But I've never had a problem, and I know some foreigners who have, but it's rare. I would say, yeah, don't be too worried about that. But know that it does happen. So
when you moved back to Tokyo, were you thinking at the time, oh, there's this opportunity with PwC, I want to make a career transition, or were you thinking of going back to teach English?
I was wanting to try to transition. So actually, when I first got back, I immediately did teaching. But I had never taught I'd never taught groups of students. And I wanted to teach groups of students because I thought that's more like what a real teacher or a normal teacher does. So I was in 3 different elementary schools with one company. They were kind of sending me out to these 3 different places. And while I was working there, I got to have a 6-week summer break with them, and I went to Australia, and that was really nice. But when that was over, I thought, oh, I have to wait another year to get such a long break. Maybe if I work for a company, I can get like 4 weeks off, like holidays from them, and build my holidays. So I said, you probably have that feeling where you feel like you need a legit career or something. And teaching, especially teaching in what we call a conversation school like Nova, it doesn't feel legit. And so I thought, I need to make my life legit. Yeah, let's do this. Can I do it? And, I think I've learned over these years that you really have to do something that you love, and that you have to try to follow your passion as much as you can, because I have a pattern of not doing that, of trying to just kind of play to, I was in the honors classes in high school, and I think a lot of people from my high school became doctors and lawyers and all these things. And I thought, oh, I have to kind of be at their level someday at least, because we were all in the same class. But I think it's more important to follow what you want to do. Because when I say I became an accountant, I was doing taxes, and after 4 years of that, I ended up quitting the firm, partly because I think, well, taxes got pretty boring. But it was like I did my finance degree, but I wasn't really doing what I wanted to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something we can both relate to as well. I mean, Ryan has a degree in finance as well and kind of debated the accountant route for like a hot minute.
Did you ever actually do it, Ryan? Did you try?
My dad is an accountant. And then I worked in the accounting department for a large foreign company after college. So I got like close, but did it do it?
I mean, I think it's nothing against accountants. I've met so many qualified ones there that I'm really appreciative to know now if I ever have questions. But if it's not your true passion, I think you shouldn't keep pushing hard at the wall to try to, make yourself mold into it,
Yeah, I agree with that. And I feel the same way. Like if somebody can, help me to pay less taxes. I'm totally appreciative of their passion for finding those loopholes and, entering numbers into the paper and stuff like that. Clearly, I don't know much about that the way I'm talking. Definitely not my passion.
You're Canadians. You're so lucky. I'm American. I always have to be aware of taxes and filing it and all that stuff. So.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure, especially like working in Japan and then still being American.
Yes, I want to dig in a little bit into that. Is it easy to transition jobs in Japan, the work visa wise? Like, is it challenging to get a new job? Do you have to get a new work visa, or is it pretty flexible in that regard?
One nice thing about Japan is that there's this visa that is usually given for people that are teaching. There is a visa called like teacher, but that's not what you're normally given. You're normally given a visa called Specialist in Humanities / International Services, which is really quite broad sounding. So, if you have that, once you get that visa and you're teaching, if you quit the teaching job, you don't have to leave the country as long as you still have time on that visa, which is, I think the first visa you get's 1 year, but after that first year, sometimes you can get a 3-year visa or even a 5-year on that same category. Once you quit your job and you have enough time on the visa, you can apply for many different jobs if the company agrees that, they want to hire you, and then they just basically do a little paperwork and you're working for them. Wow. Your visa doesn't even change. So
that's awesome.
Do you need a job initially to get the visa?
No, you can go into Japan on a tourist visa, which is 3 months for most countries. It's tricky, though. In fact, I just had a friend just yesterday. I was talking to her. I said, "How's your new job in Tokyo?" And she said, "Well, even though I had the job, the visa didn't go through in time and her 3 months was up and she had to go back to the U.S. So she's sad now in the U.S., not thinking she can even work in Tokyo. But, so it's tricky. You need to move fast if you get in and talk to a company. But, you get lucky. There's foreigners that have companies here too, and they might be able to get you the paperwork processed. It's possible to switch the tourist visa to the work visa in the country.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Sounds like a good visa program.
Yeah, Japan is notoriously kind of anti-immigration, and then their population is shrinking as well because there's so many old people kind of dying. But I think it's more friendly in that regards for if you're a native English speaker and you have a bachelor's degree minimum, then it's easy for at least to get a teaching job. I think relatively easy. How much you're being paid, that's another thing. Might not be enough for your taste, but if you're getting online income, it could be a good situation.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's interesting to know. Yeah. We were talking to the director of the co-working space. We've been members at in Ubud. One of his children was born in Tokyo, I think, in Japan at least. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, so Canadian mother, American father, born in Japan, like 3 citizenships. Like, how does it even work? And he's like, oh, just because, she was born in Japan or he was born in Japan doesn't mean that he has like Japanese citizenship. Like, he's telling us how Japan is pretty protective over that.
Right. Yeah, you can't just be born there and have citizenship. You have to go through the process and prove the relations of, all these family members and things. But, I actually last year got permanent residency in Japan.
Okay.
Because awesome. Once you have the same visa, it has to be an unbroken string of the visa for 10 years. You can get permanent residency. It cost me $80 and I had to do all this paperwork and have Japanese friends write translated letters. But it was a bit of a process, but it took them, I think, 4 months to decide. And then I just got this thing in the mail and said, go pick up your card.
Wow.
So that's cool, which now means that I don't have to have a job to live in Japan, but I can stay here.
Yeah.
I'm not dependent on an employer to renew my visa. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's big.
That's nice. I can also get a mortgage here, but I'm not thinking about that right now. I don't know. The Japanese property market is not that great it doesn't seem to like it's going to go up. I think it's kind of high because of the Olympics happening in 2020, but then they say it's going to go down. So
okay, so maybe something to revisit in 2021.
Yeah, maybe.
So at this point, do you see yourself living in Tokyo for the foreseeable future?
So actually, I see myself remaining tied to Japan. I don't, it's going to be tricky when I do quit my job here and travel around. But, I've had my current job for 4 years and I seem to hit this wall every 4 years, to be honest, recently, where I'm like, I need to go and travel for a long period of time. And the only way I could do that is to quit my job. So I'm going to quit, guys. That seems to be my pattern. And I think I'm getting close. So I think even within the next several months, few to several months, I'm going to quit and then try to keep this permanent residency I think I need to come to Japan at least once a year. And I have to see if there's income requirements tied to this as well. But that's my initial plan, is to try to keep it, but travel and try to work online and start meeting all these digital nomads,
Yeah, that's super cool. What have you been doing for the last 4 years for work?
My main job is teaching business English. So I went back to teaching after I quit my job as the accountant. I actually got my master's. I went traveling for 6 months. I left Japan for the second time, did a 6 months of travel, some at home and then 1 month in Brazil and 1 month in Argentina, and then came back and met a guy. I was out of work and I met a guy in a bar and happened to say, hey, I'm going to start my master's in education online through a U.S. university, but I'm looking for a job to do while I'm studying online here in Tokyo. And he, a couple months later, a coworker of his quit and he said, hey, do you want to interview? And that's how I got my current job. So, it was for a pub quiz. They were having a pub quiz at the bar and he had one friend with him and I go, can I join your team? I'm here by myself. So, hey, networking is always key.
Yeah, you never know where you're going to meet somebody who can think about you in the future for a job.
Yeah, so I teach businessmen in their offices in the financial district of Tokyo, which I think they liked that I had that finance background and the accountancy work. I think it seems more legitimate to our students that I'm there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you just know that a little bit more about the context of the business.
Right. And we teach mostly lawyers in a law firm. And the way they work is very similar to how I was working at the accountancy firm, like charging your time, and having client meetings. So I feel that I definitely know what they're going through. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So the part about a bar I think is a good segue into just kind of what day-to-day life is like in Tokyo, and especially how it's changed over the past 10 years. What are some of the things that happen day to day in Tokyo?
So this is notorious. People work a lot. The typical Monday to Friday busy time on the trains. It seems like from about 7 a.m. to midnight, or it's busy on the train. Or the rush hour in the evening can go as late as midnight. People work a lot during the week, but after their work, they tend to go drinking. Their boss will often go with them and they'll all go together, leave the office, and they have to keep drinking as late as the boss is drinking. They can't go home until the boss goes home. And that's kind of Japanese culture. I I work for an American company, so we don't do that at my office, but I know my students do it sometimes. So that's really common. And beer is very popular here, so there's a lot of Japanese beers. Craft beer has gotten a lot more popular in the last 3 or 4 years. So there's a lot of places around. Karaoke, okay, it's a Japanese word. It came from Japan, so that's a huge thing even now in Japan, and it's a private room. So you can go into the karaoke place. Often they'll go after work, after the restaurant. And they go and you can order like all you can drink for 2 hours.
Wow.
And it'll be something like $20 or $25. And so you have a phone in the room and you're just picking up the phone and ordering your drinks. And meanwhile you're singing, and there's like, I don't know, like 20,000 songs. There's so many song choices and a lot of English songs too. So I usually sing in English, but it's fun if you can. Sometimes if the Japanese are very accommodating, like if you get drunk or even if you're not drunk, you could totally knock on their door, their karaoke room door, and just join them. They'll let you come in. And you can hear Japanese songs the way they're meant to be sung.
That's so awesome. Yeah.
Have you learned to speak Japanese since you've been there?
I have. I'm not. I mean, it's sad for how long I've been here that I can't read perfectly, or I can't do business conversations that well. But I never studied before I came, and I've been working full time since I've been here. So, and I don't have a Japanese husband or Japanese kids. So that's kind of a block that I've had. But yeah, I learned. There are free Japanese lessons at your like local town office that are always trying to help foreigners. So I went to those when I first came, and I've had several books and just tried to pick it up mostly by speaking, which is why my reading ability is not as good, but I can read several. There are 3 alphabets in Japan. 2 of them you can learn in a day, but the third one is the Chinese characters, and you need to know 2,000 of those to read a newspaper. Whoa. So I might know 150 or so, maybe 200 of those, like the simple ones for like age and day and things like that. But the other 2 you can learn. You can learn how to pronounce them and read them in a day if you spent the whole day going through. There's like 30 characters on each alphabet. And the reason there are 2 alphabets is one of them is it's what children learn first, and it's like general historical alphabet in Japan. But the other alphabet is only for words that they took from other languages. So, for example, the word for hamburger in Japan is hamburger. So, yeah, hamburger is written in that third alphabet. It wouldn't be written in the other one that children learn. So,
that's
wow.
interesting.
That's so interesting. I can imagine it'd be really difficult to learn a language that has an entirely different alphabet system.
Yeah, let's see if you can you understand my Japanese? Okay, try this one. Okay. Strawberry ice cream.
Oh, that's great. We lived in Banff in Alberta in Canada for a while, and there's a massive influx of Japanese tourism. And I worked at Lululemon for 2 years there, so I kind of learned a little bit of that.
Yeah, I had I worked at a restaurant, and one of the cooks who worked with me was Japanese. There's kind of like a subgroup of people who live in that area who are from Japan because there's a lot of Japanese tourists who come in. So she taught me like all the swear words in Japanese and a little bit of a like kitchen communication. Like, so when you're in a kitchen, they'll be like, just kind of like talking across each other. A little bit was in Japanese as well. Everyone would always say like, hi. To answer like whatever she wanted.
Awesome. Yeah, that's one of the words you need to know for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. So day to day, you can get by like with a little bit of Japanese, but like speaking English mostly.
In Tokyo, you can. I think you guys will be okay if you use simple English and just speak slowly but a lot more people in Japan in Tokyo can speak English than they pretend to. They're shy, and so I ask them in Japanese, do you speak English? And they'll say no, and then they'll speak English back to you. So it's kind of a shy. They want to be perfect. Japanese people want to be perfect at something more than trying it, you know?
Yeah.
So
I think I understand that as well. Like I know when we were in South America, I would like kind of stand back, even though, so my Spanish is not fluent by any means, but it's conversational, or it was at that point. And I would kind of like stand back and like listen to conversations, and I'd like know what was going on, but I would never like contribute anything because I felt, I guess, like too scared to make mistakes in front of somebody who is like completely fluent in the language.
Oh yeah. I understand it, but I think what I'm saying is that you can speak English. I think there will be some times that they won't understand, but you can do a lot. But there is one thing I should explain, like, and I'll say the word and you can listen back and repeat it. There's a very helpful word that is sumimasen. Sumimasen.
Sumimasen?
Yeah, sumimasen. Try it, Ryan.
Sumimasen.
Yeah, so sumimasen is very important because it means excuse me, and that is also used to order food. So in Japan, they will not come and ask you to take your order. You have to call for them. So you have to say sumimasen, like you can scream it, and then they come to your table.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I remember, so when I was young, we had a Japanese, he must have been like 20 or something, guy come over and live with us. He was like a friend of a friend, like a third wave friend's son or something of some acquaintance of my father who came and lived with us. And he basically just like his father had sent him to Canada to learn English, but he just spoke Japanese on the phone to his girlfriend the whole time. But I remember one of the things, I only remember one word he taught us. It was like, oh yeah, sumi.
Oh yeah, oyasumi. Oyasumi nasai, that's good night.
Okay.
You say it right before you go to bed.
I can't remember what it was. Yeah. I just remember it because it was, oh yeah, sumi.
And yeah, sumi masen. You got to remember that if that helps you. But also, there's no tipping in Japan at all for anything. So whatever the price is in a restaurant, that's what you pay. You don't tip taxi drivers. You don't tip them for anything. So
that's good to know. That's one of those things that's not universal at all. And like we'll arrive somewhere and have our first payment and we're like, do we leave extra money? Do we not? Because it's like so offensive in North America not to leave a tip for your server. But then in other countries, it's almost like offensive to try and give them extra money.
They're trying to be exact here. So if you give them 2 extra pennies at McDonald's, the woman will run out of McDonald's and chase you down the street to give you the 2 cents back. That's Japan. So
I like this country already.
Yeah. So don't try to pay them more. They're confused. They're like, what? They will insist to give it back. So
that's really interesting. Yeah. Have you had the opportunity to travel much around Japan outside of Tokyo?
Oh yeah, like you get bored of big city. You gotta get out of the big city sometimes. Yeah. There's a lot of wonderful places in Japan. It's very varied environments as well. Like we have a sand dune. You probably didn't know we had a huge sand dune in the country, but it's in a place called Totori. I haven't been there. I've just seen the pictures, but that surprises people. And we have, Okinawa, which is like tropical islands, and Hokkaido, we have wonderful powder skiing, big powder.
I have a friend who's doing a season there right now.
Yeah. I'd love to spend more time in Hokkaido than I have. I've been a few times to ski, or to snowboarder. But yeah, so we're 70% mountains here, and lots of beaches. So it's a very varied country for that.
So where are if someone was coming to Japan for a few weeks, where are the places you'd say, oh, you should definitely go outside of Tokyo?
Definitely Kyoto. I mean, if you come to Tokyo and you don't go to Kyoto, you've really missed a lot, because it's just the cultural heart of Japan, and it's a lot more. It's going to be very crowded in cherry blossom time, like crazy crowded, but it's those temples. If you're only going to be in Japan once, like you need to see some of those temples, and you will probably experience you'll get templed out a little bit, like I'm sure you may have done in Chiang Mai, but there's like 4 or 5 major ones that you should probably go to see in Kyoto. And I think Hiroshima, especially me being American, it's a very special place, an important place to go as well. We say Hiroshima. I know Hiroshima is another way that people say it, but it's not that far from Kyoto, so I definitely go from Kyoto to Hiroshima, not Tokyo to Hiroshima direct. But there's this beautiful, I'm sure you've seen a picture of it, less than an hour from Hiroshima is Miyajima, which is the island with the big red gate in the ocean. Like if you've seen that gorgeous red Japanese gate that's in the ocean, that's where that is. So it's really a great photo spot, and there's wild deer that roam around this island called Miyajima near Hiroshima, and you can feed them crackers. They're not dangerous or anything, but that's that people like to do that. The deer are there too. I think, added bonus.
Yeah, I think somebody recommended that to us, and I was like, feeding deer. That sounds like something we should do in Japan.
Yeah, the most famous place for that is called Nara, which I don't know if you've been reading the guidebook for Japan yet, but Nara is close to Kyoto. It's like about half an hour away by train. And that's the big deer place with the there's a few temples there as well.
Okay.
So
maybe it was that she recommended then, but I know there was definitely a recommendation for feeding deer.
Yeah. I mean, you have to go to the Peace Museum as well when you go to Hiroshima. That's the other thing, is the atomic bomb museum, basically. I think everyone in the world should go there, as a reminder of what we shouldn't do. But,
I'm curious, how is your perspective on that changed since being in Japan? And I just asked just to clarify. I know the kind of conventional education you get at home is like, this was a necessary step to end the war, but you don't really. I feel like you don't learn about the scale and like the horror. You kind of get a little bit of taste of it, but I'm curious how being there, learning from it from a bit deeper perspective has changed, if it has.
I was actually I've been to the bomb museum twice in Hiroshima. The first time I went, as soon as I got out, there were South Korean TV reporters trying to interview me, asking if I thought a nuclear bomb was necessary. And my first reaction then, and I think still now, is to say I never think it's necessary, ever. But I know there were lots of things going on in World War II, and Japan there was so much violence, but I think like the Japanese people now, I don't talk with very old people about the war. I've not really ever had that chance to talk about it, and most people from that age now are either inaccessible to me or they've died. But I think most Japanese now, like, they don't have malice against Americans. They don't like the U.S. military presence in Japan right now, especially in Okinawa. They're angry about it, but I think generally Japan doesn't have a standing army. The U.S. forced them to not have an army after World War II, and they still don't. And so I think there is this prevailing feeling of peace, and they try to follow that. And also, I was here during the big earthquake of 2011 with the tsunami up north, and I mean that really knocked people back, and just I think everybody was reminded of what was really important in their lives, and being humble and trying not to be too warlike or ever think that way,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely. That's really interesting. Yeah. I think it's always, well, we did, I guess, an episode on kind of like the idea of like dark tourism. And I think it's like important for people to make a decision if it's important for them to see those things or not. I found like going to Pearl Harbor for me was I was really surprised by how many Japanese people there were there that had come to like, put flowers in the water, to come see it. And I was really struck by like, oh wow, all these people know about this. And it's like, there's this sort of like piece of nationalism there, but it's like, they didn't do this. Like they weren't even alive.
They also are not told in their school books, even now, about a lot of what they did. I don't want to get too deep into it, but I read The Rape of Nanking while I was here. And that was a huge, like, I was not taught that in my American school, that Japan had done that in China and killed so many people in China during World War II. And so I was like, wow, I can't believe. And most Japanese don't know about that to the full extent, or some will even deny or act just like in disbelief. I don't usually go into these things with them, but
yeah.
Yeah, their textbooks have been kind of whitewashed in some ways.
Yeah, I guess it's hard too if it's like more of like a closed off culture.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're getting? So I know, like for example, if you move to Latin America, and you kind of, it feels like the barrier to that culture maybe isn't as strong as the Japanese culture. Do you feel like you're kind of like creeping into like Japanese culture more and more? Is there kind of like a wall that foreigners don't really get through?
I think you can. You'll never be a part of this culture and that wears on people. That can really wear on people who are long term here. But you do have, when you marry into the culture, when you have children in the culture, and you've committed to being here long term, I think it is possible to get fairly close. And I don't know. I still have good friends here that they won't share personal things with me until either they've already happened, like okay, now I'm married, or like, wow, now I'm pregnant. I'm 7 months pregnant now, and I'm like, wow, I can't even tell, or I haven't seen you. You didn't tell me. Like, some personal things are still kept pretty personal, and so that, yeah, it's easy, I think, in Latin America to feel closer. It is a barrier. It is harder, but at the same time, if you drink with Japanese people, you'll get, there'll be a lot of jokes. I don't know how deep the conversation is going to be, but they'll definitely be very warm and call you over to their table,
Yeah, that's really interesting. Has it been challenging to create community in Tokyo?
It's sometimes challenging to create deeper local community, but a lot of my friends are still long-term. The word gaijin in Japan means foreigner, so we sometimes call ourselves gaijin. They'll call us gaijin, but the gaijin community I've stayed pretty close to. It is hard because a lot of people will say goodbye. They'll move back to their respective countries, and I've gotten used to saying goodbye a lot. But because I try to travel as much as I can from Japan, I think that helps me stay in the meet people somewhere and be happy to only know them then and make the most of it, say goodbye, and hope to see them again in the future. But in terms of local community, it can be hard if especially when you're working so much. A lot of times we have to make plans to meet people 3 or 4 weeks in advance to really make sure everybody's free.
Oh, wow.
Because a lot of the only free time you have is during the weekend. So I've not found that to be a challenge. It's hard to be spontaneous here with friends.
Yeah, it's not like the type of thing that's like, hey, let's go grab drinks after work today.
Run into each other in the street. Yeah,
if you run into each other and you go, hey, let's go have a drink. It might happen, but often they've got like, oh, there's this thing I already have planned, or I'm actually just on a break from work. I have to go back to work or something. So, because you work normally till 7 at the earliest if you're in a normal job in Japan, not like teaching, but maybe a company job. And often it extends to 8 p.m. or so.
Wow.
The trains also don't run all night. The trains, most people have to get the train by 11:30 at night. And the taxis are so expensive that you don't want to miss that train. You don't want to have to pay the taxi fee to get home.
Right.
So
that's so crazy. That's like past my bedtime.
Well, that's good. That's going to work for you. And the trains are really reasonable. The train price has not gone up in 10 years. It went up one time for a tax increase. That's it. Like the prices have not gone up. I appreciate that.
Yeah, totally. I feel like that's like as cities develop and get busier, that almost always goes up.
I want to dive a little bit into Tokyo.
Yeah.
What are some places in Tokyo that most tourists don't go that you go as a local a lot, or you think would be great to visit?
So one place is a place that I'm actually thinking about writing an ebook about if I can ever do it. Might have the time right now. Really busy, but it's my neighborhood where I live now. It's called Shimokitazawa. Shimokitazawa, and it's called like the hipster neighborhood of Tokyo. It's not far from the famous like big street crossing that's in most of the movies in a place called Shibuya. It's a 5-minute train ride from there, but it's just a little bit into the suburbs, so it feels like a small village. The streets are very narrow, and there are a lot of secondhand clothing shops, cafes, and like music bars, and like what they call live houses for live music. So that's a really cool place, and it's very easy to walk around and see a lot of some artistic culture, I guess.
That's super neat. Yeah, I attempted to write that down, but I might need to actually get the proper spelling from you so I can put that in the show notes.
Yeah. It's until you get familiar with Japanese, it's hard to know how to spell it. And so that's one place, and I'm trying to think of. I would say, I think there's an area called Nippori. I can give you the spelling too. Or Nishi Nippori, which has this is going to sound creepy, but there's like a big cemetery there, which is very peaceful, very big. And next to it is like a lot of traditional shops and like the older part of town, which feels a little bit more traditional. And that's actually really nice. There's a beautiful shrine over there. It's just quieter than a lot of the places that you'll go to, but still really nice. So.
Have you lived in a number of different areas of the city?
I've lived in this neighborhood because I just love it. It's been probably one thing that kept me here for so long. But I've lived in about 4 different places, all on the west side of Tokyo.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I imagine because I think normally, like, your neighborhood oftentimes like defines your experience in a city more so than the city as a whole. But I imagine it's even more so in Tokyo since it's so gigantic.
Yeah, and there are a lot of neighborhoods. Like each neighborhood feels really different. So, yeah, I would say that's accurate.
That's great. Is there anything in Tokyo that you like really don't like, I guess?
Or maybe things that are like popular, but you think would be worth skipping?
Oh, well, the first thing I thought was the robot restaurant. Okay. I'm sure you've already heard of it.
Crossing it
somehow.
off the top of our list.
It seems like in the last few years, everybody has to go there. At least, they've got to check it off. But I definitely won't be going back. I've gone once. And maybe once is fine. But it's just like the food they served there was really bad. It was like a can of beer. It was overpriced. And then there was like chips or something. Like that's all you could have. It's like you're in a crowd just watching this craziness going on in front of you. And you can't like eat before you go for sure. And then, it's just, I don't know. It was way over the top for me, for too over the top.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting how it's made the top of like so many lists. Like I feel like I've read that on so many lists. And it seems, I mean, where else in the world can you go to a robot restaurant? I feel like that's what attracts people.
That's what it is. Yeah. So I wanted to say don't go there, but I almost feel like the curiosity is going to probably supersede the $70 or however much it costs to go. So
I wonder if it's
like
you can go like once and that's like all you need.
Oh yeah. No, I'm here to tell you that's
Those robots don't endear themselves too much.
Yeah. You'll probably recommend it though to your friends. Like, oh yeah, you should go there once, So
what are some
and actually
sorry, continue.
I was gonna say this is me. Are you guys gamers? Are you into the video games or anime cartoon culture?
Not especially.
I used to be into video games, but then I had to become more legit, as you said earlier. So I had to get into that.
I should say, like, were you ever into the Japanese comic book type of stuff?
I was a big Dragon Ball Z fan back in the day.
Okay. Like I found I wasn't really hardcore into any of those scenes. So maybe that's why I don't find what they call Akihabara or Electric Town, which is not far from Tokyo Station. I don't find Akihabara to be very impressive. It's mostly if you're looking for like toys from some of these comic books, you might go into a shop and be like, wow, look at all these different toys they have. And some of the women are like very suggestive looking and blah, blah, blah. Like, and that's also where the maid cafes are, the famous maid cafes where they dressed up as like Victorian maids and you go into the cafe and they talk to you in very polite Japanese. Like, may I please stir your sugar, sir? It would delight me to no end. Like, that's what they're kind of saying in Japanese. I'm like, I wasn't so impressed by Akihabara, but some people would hear that and be like, sacrilege! It's amazing. So maybe it's because I wasn't into the culture, that part of the subculture originally. So
yeah, that's fair.
Are there what are some people? I think people would like think of Tokyo and think of there's going to be like so much weird stuff to do. And the robot restaurant isn't the greatest. What are some weird things in Tokyo that are worth going to check out?
What I would say, I had a weird experience, but I don't know if it's worth paying the money. Although it might be worth paying the money if you have. Are you guys going to get the JR Rail Pass? Do you know what that is?
Yeah, we think we probably should, but since we're kind of traveling at this point, we don't know the logistics of it. But we've heard that we should get it.
I think, because I know, Amanda, you told me you were staying, your first plan was 5 days in Tokyo, and then you said maybe Kyoto or Hiroshima.
Yeah, we're going. We're going to both. We're doing Tokyo, then Kyoto, then Hiroshima.
If you're doing that, then I would definitely buy the 7-day. Maybe you don't need, there's a 7-day and a 14-day, but maybe 14-day is too much. But you might need to time, like, don't activate your rail pass until you leave Tokyo. And so you'll have plenty of time, or like maybe a day before Tokyo, you leave Tokyo, just to make sure if you're staying for like 9 days or something. If you're the first 2 days in Tokyo, I wouldn't activate this pass until you're almost ready to leave Tokyo, because that's where the real money starts to need to be paid. The JR Rail Pass is basically, I think it's like $290, $280 a person, but it's more than that. I think it's like $320 if you don't have it, just to go to Kyoto and back.
Wow.
So if you do get it, you've got 7 days of anything JR, which is the National Railway, Japan Railways. And you wouldn't pay any more to go from Kyoto to Hiroshima. You could go to Nara, you can go to Kobe, like all these other places would be no more, no extra money. So
yeah. We've kind of like read about it. It's easy to find information, but then it's kind of confusing as well. And I think because we don't have a mailing address to get it sent to, that's like the issue that we've currently been chatting about.
Oh yeah. And that's the thing. Like if you're a resident of Japan, you cannot get it. So you have to order it online outside of Japan, and then have it picked up or have it delivered somewhere. And then you just get this little thing saying you might even be able, because I haven't activated it myself ever, you might be able to like just get a digital coupon or so. I'm not sure if it's possible now. And then you show them, once you get to Tokyo, you show them that you purchased it, and then you pick it up at an office in Japan. Okay. But you have to prove that you bought it outside of the country.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to look into that more. We were just talking about it today, actually. It's interesting because you look at it and it looks so expensive. But then it's like when you start breaking down, like, oh, how much does this train cost? How much is this bullet train? And you're like, oh, wow, this is actually a really good deal.
It's a really good deal. It's just the bullet trains are very expensive. And so if it's not, though, it's really a good deal if you have the pass. Okay, so cool. Yeah, that's why they restrict us. We would totally be using it all the time. So
yeah, I thought that was really interesting when I was reading about it, how people in Japan couldn't get it. Like, do you get something as like, I guess like a quote unquote local? Like, do you get a different sort of pass or?
Oh no, we have anybody can get these some passes for different areas, but no, we do not get a discount. They're like, spend money in our country now. Like, we need domestic spending.
Interesting.
It needs to go up.
It's so reverse from so many other places we've been.
Yeah, that's why we love we now finally have, I think in the last 5 years, the number of low-cost carriers has just skyrocketed. So finally, it's cheaper to go to Shanghai or to go to an outside of Japan for the like 3 or 4 day stint. Because of the travel costs, just the train costs are expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting point. I was talking to a friend who she's American. Yeah, American as well. And she's lived in South Korea for a number of years. And I was saying how we were going to Japan, they're basically right beside each other. And she's like, oh yeah, I haven't been to Japan yet. And I was like, you've lived there for 8 years and you haven't been? And she's like, yeah, it's just like expensive. Like every time I want to go. Or no, It wasn't South Korea. Sorry. It was somebody who was living in China, in Beijing.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, it's hard too if you're earning a Chinese income. Yeah. Like the Chinese income is not going to be very high, I think. I don't know what she's doing there, but like, to translate it to yen is going to be hard for China, I think. But we do get a lot of Chinese tourists now. I think there's more and more airlines that are, coming up. So.
Yeah. Awesome. So you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. But you're about to make another career change in the next couple of months, and you said you want to start doing more traveling and working online. What does that look like for you?
So I think I was listening to your podcast about being a digital nomad, the reality. I was like halfway through it when I got the call. I was like, okay. But I think you both had said something about how you want to, maybe you're doing a main job, but you want to find your passion and like be doing things you enjoy at the same time as a digital nomad. And that's really my goal. Cause right now I'm doing, I actually have 3 jobs right now. And one of them I'm going to keep after I quit the other two is the plan. This is an online job where I do editing. I edit academic research papers. So it's not always scintillating. It's not always the most exciting work, but it is all online. And I've been doing it for a little while now, trying to like get that solidified so that I have something when I leave. But that I wouldn't say I'm super passionate about, but it's solid. So I think the goal is to do that and then eventually transition out of it when I am building up like an ebook, maybe write some ebooks about Japan and see where that goes first.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I don't know if I would be ready to take the leap unless I had that job. But it's going to be interesting to see how it's going to work with like being in cafes or not having a set base. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's quite the transition, but it's super fun just to see like what works best for you because everyone's unique.
Yeah, I'm sure. Are you guys loving being like, you've been on the road for, is it 6 months now or longer than that on this stint?
Yeah, we left in the start of October, so.
About 6 months
December,
now.
January, February. Yeah, almost 6 months.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gone by really quickly though, in a way.
Wow.
So we'd previously done like 6 months of backpacking before, but in this way, I think it goes by quicker because you're focused on other things as opposed to just being, locked into travel mode and enjoying yourself. But it's been really fun, and we've done a whole bunch of different experiences that we've tried to travel and work at the same time. And we've done here in Bali almost 2 months just based out of one spot, and we've had co-working spaces, and we've tried to just work at our apartments. So we've been like slowly figuring out how we can perfectly balance travel with work.
That's great. Yeah, I know I imagine it's a challenge. You really have to be self-motivated, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It's a fun challenge though.
Yeah. And just like, self-aware as well to know how you work and how you don't work, and not trying to deceive yourself into thinking you're capable of being productive at certain points. Oh,
I did want to ask you guys, are you into hiking by any chance?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, there is one trail. There's actually two trails, but I went on one trail in Japan, it's basically a 4-hour train ride south of Osaka, which is Osaka's half an hour from Kyoto, so you could maybe have time. I don't know. But if you're on a fixed time schedule, you may not have time. I had 3 days actually down there, but it's called Kumano Kodo. And Kumano Kodo is one of only 2 pilgrimage routes in the world that is World Heritage recognized. And so the other one is in Spain, the Santiago de Compostela. So this is the other one, and it's really like these beautiful trees, and it's a Buddhist pilgrimage route that's been going for over 1,000 years. And you can you can train down and then bus into part of it, stay like near a hot spring, which I recommend you go to a hot spring. You got to do that.
Okay.
And then you can hike for a day or two of the trail, and it's not very crowded at all. So you can feel like totally isolated in the trees and just following the trail. It's really nice.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a great recommendation.
Yeah.
Amazing. So where can people go to find out more about you, Becky?
So I have a blog called TokyoBecky.com.
Cool.
So yeah, BECKY. And I have, it's the same name on Instagram. I tend to post more like photos more regularly there than blog posts. But yeah, I think I'm going to write about the cherry blossom spots pretty soon.
You should do that before April 4th.
I should do that like tomorrow or yeah.
No pressure or anything.
Woo! Okay.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time
Becky.
today. It's been awesome chatting with you.
You're welcome. I hope you have a wonderful time in Japan.
To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanderers.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at WorldWanderers1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.